a life, can't put me in a box. I redefine any definition you got. I am the tiger, I'm making steps to the top. The flames, I'll rip it up, you just gotta hand me the rock. Take a seat, you cannot stand it. All I know, the flow harder than a Scotch bunny. Don't try studying me, you cannot manage. This ain't what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon. This ain't what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon.
Hello, 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 hello. Hi, everyone. This is going to be a really, really interesting segment. It may take a while, so make sure you pull up your seats and, get your wine out, whatever you're doing. Get comfortable in doing that and listen to the show today. And if you guys want to come on, make sure you let me know if you want to share your experiences. That is more than fine. But please understand that I do not encourage people to explore past traumas in open platforms. Okay. So, awesome. Thank you for stopping in. How have you been, Rainbow Rev? So, welcome to Life Discussions with Dr. Jefferson. This is a place for accountability conversations around topics that affect the Black community and the Brown community, and also universal topics, so worldwide topics. This topic right here is going to expand. I'm going to show some stats. We're going to talk about the population of the world that has been affected by the heinous crime, the heinous deed, the heinous act of rape and sexual abuse. We're going to talk about some of the indicators. I had a conversation earlier today around engaged in conversation, should I say, around some of the things that Kevin Samuels has said about where men in their 50s should be targeting their attentions as far as like dating interest and things like that. And there was a question that was brought up, and I had a viewer send me a message asking me to come out and talk about this particular topic because that one piece of the show earlier really, really resonated with them. And so here I am to talk about this topic, and it is one that's very sensitive. I do encourage people to get the help that they need, and that's one of the tips that I'm going to talk about today. But also I encourage people to find resiliency around having the difficult conversations that will affect those people that you are responsible for caring for. I mentioned one of the things that another viewer sent me in the description for today's topics. And I would love for you guys to share your experiences being a person on the outside looking in, where you see things that you feel are red flags or unsafe conditions for kids, and you maybe felt voiceless, right? And felt really bad for the kids and things like that. But we're going to definitely get into this conversation. And I want to talk about your general understandings and thoughts and reflections around single people dating first, because I feel like that's a very important component of the conversation. Although sexual abuse is a thing that affects so many people. And when we say affect so many people, we know that about every 68 seconds or so, another person is sexually assaulted in America. That's just in America. If we expand that out a bit into the rest of the world, the vast majority of all countries that have a certain type of population have very high statistics of rape. And that raises a whole nother eyebrow when it comes to these conversations. So I'm going to show you guys the map, and we're going to get into the nooks and crannies of this conversation a little bit later. But right now, I would like to know, what are your thoughts around dating single people? And single people just going out to date in general when they have kids at home. Specifically, that's what this question is tailored towards. Because you have some people who feel like if you're single, you deserve to be with somebody. You deserve to find somebody. You deserve to have the person that is for you. And the truth is, I feel like anybody who is interested in continuing to expand life should definitely not only feel entitled to the pursuit of happiness or what happiness entails and things like that, but those people should go after what their heart desires in a way that says that they are very intentional and they're purpose driven in that hunt. However, I think that when you become a parent, there is a certain way that you have to move. And I think that oftentimes we associate becoming a parent with a certain level of responsibility that I'm not quite sure is a realistic expectation. And so when I say that, what I mean is this. I'm not sure if we understand that becoming a parent doesn't make you a different person. There are several predators out here. There are several sexual predators who are also parents. There are several sexual predators who are predatory towards their children. The vast majority of sexual assault crimes that occur against children, and I want to be very clear, 1 in 4 boys are sexually assaulted before the age of 10. Boys. We oftentimes just focus on the females, right? Because the female seems to be the point of contention when it comes to conversations around rape. But the reality is there are several boys who are raped before age 10 because they can't consent, right? They don't have the ability to decipher whether or not this is something that they should be engaging in just because they're a boy or what, right? So I think that it's really important for you to stay on course and understand that the realities around sexual abuse in children is that sexual abuse happens to children. So not just boys and not just by men. Women are predators as well. And girls are praised and boys are praised equally in these systems. So I want to, hey Liz, how are you? I want to address the specific comment that was shared by this person who left the commentary about her not allowing her children to be around men that she may date. And then she also said the child's father better not have his friends around the kids. The vast majority of sexual assault cases against kids happen in families. Yeah, and when I say the vast majority, I'm talking about 92%. 92%. 92% of the time, it's a family member or close filial associate. So that's like a close friend that's considered to be like family. So that I want you guys to just sit with that for a while. Move away from the idea that you can protect your child in all settings by way of removing whatever they're exposed to. I'm doing well. So that's the first part. The second part is this. In that narrative, she acts as if parents can't be sexually abusive, to include herself. Some of the sexual promiscuity that happens in children is due to too much helicopter parenting. So that's why I say it's important that you address your own traumas. Because when you've had a certain exposure to trauma, when you have been sexually assaulted yourself as a young person by family members, when you have been a person who has sat with the story of family members or friends who have been sexually abused by family members, when you've gone through those particular experiences and you allow just those experiences in and of itself to motivate you to isolate your children from the presence of other people, right? As a result of that, you're only doing more damage, because children are naturally, when you tell them don't do things, right? Encouraging a child to not do a thing is not a way for you to truly get that child to not engage in those behaviors. The best way, if you want to try and get a child to follow your orders or your instructions or whatever it is you're trying to actually intentionally get them to do, is to provide them with adequate information. So not fallacies. Give them the facts. Give them the facts and be a reliable source of information for them at all times. Have the conversations when you're supposed to have the conversations. Because the reality is, if you are not having the conversations with them, there is no way for these children to know what to be afraid of, reluctant to step into, right? So I think that you have to do your due diligence and have conversations with them, with other people, with family members around the traumas that you have experienced. So that looks like, when you're having the talk initially, when the child is around 3 to 4 years old, and you're talking to them about body parts, and the developmentally appropriate labels for their body parts and their exploration, because kids go through the first bout of psychosexual development around the age 3 to 4. This is a great time for you to address whatever trauma you've been through when you're, explaining to them why they should be protective of their parts and what the parts are, and, the proper way for them to move in relationships that say that you don't invite people in. So you say, years ago, a young girl in Florida killed her father. It was discovered during her trial, not only that he had been abusing her, but her little sister as well. Yes. Yes. And I have to emphasize that the vast majority of people that are sexually abused, they never say anything. So when we talk about the stats, and I show you guys the stats today, I want you to understand that these are statistics that only cover the reported cases, reported incidents of sexually abused kids, sexually abused adults. And one of the main reasons is because people feel like their complaints are ignored by the police and authorities. They feel like there is no validity because there are some things in their behaviors, in their environment, in their responses to their environment that may make their stories questionable oftentimes. And of course, we know that victims feel like they are to blame for putting themselves in certain situations. So, one of the things that to go back to the point about Kevin Samuels, one of the things that really disturbs me, and that's what I mentioned earlier, is the fact that he encourages grown men in their 50s to seek dating women in their early 20s. And obviously, clearly, that says that there is something wrong with this picture, right? And I think that oftentimes we don't get a chance to address these things, and we don't have these conversations because oftentimes women are ashamed, right? And women, they're silenced in these conversations where they should be holding these men accountable freely. They are not allowed to, especially in the Black community, because of past traumas when it comes to our things that we've dealt with and dealt with as a culture of people, and the way that we have come about in understanding our role as women and protecting our men and things like that, trying to protect our culture. We've lost our way. So what I will say is this: it's very questionable that there would be a grown man on a public platform of any type with a huge following encouraging other young men to wait until their 50s and target young women in their 20s. And that's a point of contention that he makes. The other part is, in being featured on a show with the Urban Therapist on his platform yesterday, there was a conversation that I had around the expectation. So it's a reality that young Black men are now starting to really think that they should be successful. Their success should be reached, or their peak in success should be reached around their 50s. You shouldn't. You said a lot of shame is associated with sexual abuse. People will take that kind of secret to their graves. I agree. I agree. And a lot of sexual abuse happens within family systems. I have been in situations where I've had to intervene in families and remove kids because the mother really felt like it was okay for her father, which is the grandfather of her daughters, to engage in sex with her daughters. So give me a sec. Let me bring up these stats. Okay. So let's see if I can blow this up just a tidbit here. Man, they're trying to get me to buy this Citizen watch. But no, this is my favorite kind right here, the Eco Drives. I don't like this type of the Eco Drive because it's just not cute. But let's look at this. So just to kind of explore and give you guys a good idea of what this means, when you see the darker purple color, the blues, of course, that means that there is a low percentage of rapes reported in these areas. But we're going to talk about what that means and what that looks like as as compared to other places of the world. And the most important part is, very much like I've discussed with you guys before, there are so many places in our world that is unaccounted for, undocumented, charted, right? Territory. And so these are the places that we see in gray. Okay. And the thing is, like I've mentioned in several conversations, in South Africa, there is so much undeveloped and untethered land, so many places and so many spaces, so many countries in this continent where it's underdeveloped. And so because they're underdeveloped and without a structured or organized government, these numbers go unreported altogether. I've spoken, I think, on this platform about some of my traumas that I experienced while in Africa, in uncharted territory, or territory that was considered to be hostile. During my time in the military service, and our helicopter was shot down. And that was an extremely difficult time for me. And it showed me what very harsh rapes look like in reality. But that was a very difficult time. Now, if you look, this is also, and it was close to here, this is also a place where the percentage of rape, and they're the leading country of rapes. So I want you guys to take notice of that. Okay. So the rate is 132.4. That's ridiculous for that population of people. And this is just in 2021. These are their statistics as of 2021, and we are halfway through this year. Okay. So that's what I want you guys to think about. We live here in America, where in the United States, we're like number 4 on the list. But our reported rapes are extremely high as well. Being number 4 on the list of all of the countries in the world that are accounted for is not a good thing, for sure. But what it says is that these are cases, and we're talking about only reported cases now, okay? So if we think about it, about 1 in every 10 cases is reported, right? And out of reported cases, about 1 in 4 of those are young boys. Man. And when we talk about the impact of rape on our culture and how we look at this piece, it's just really sad. So here are some of the numbers as you can kind of see them by country. This is where we saw South Africa way down here on the spectrum, while everybody else is over here pacing. Australia, the numbers are high, just about as high as ours. That's alarming, especially for Belgium. I thought that was really interesting, because I don't know how many of you have been and lived in Belgium, but it's definitely alarming to see the numbers of reported rapes for this year reach all the way up to 27.9, because it's like, what does that say for the way that they're responding to not only COVID, but being in their household? So the shelter in place orders and things like that, because it's been a bit difficult over there. But to see us come in right after them at 27.3, we're definitely not out, we're not doing so much better. So what I want to say about this is this: even though we say that dating and being a single woman is something that brings about extremely harsh realities for the possibility of our children being sexually assaulted, the reality is your children can be sexually assaulted by someone in your family, and they're more likely to have been sexually assaulted by someone in your family before they are sexually assaulted by someone that you bring into your life as an intimate partner. That's the reality, okay? The other piece is this: I think that young women and men, when single, have to know how to adequately protect their children. And so being a single parent sometimes look like you're not dating at all. So I'm going to be very specific about this. Being a single parent means that you need to know how to properly protect your child. Some people are married and are still a single parent. Some people are entire married, okay? And they're still a single parent. There are several times where cases are reported to the Department of Family and Children Services, and I've intervened in those cases, and the abuser is definitely the father. There are several times where I've been the therapist for a child, and nobody has ever known that anything ever happened to the child. And then children are in front of me at 12 and 13 years old telling me that they were sexually assaulted at 4 and 5 years old. There are several times where I've been in front of clients who are in their 30s, and nobody ever knew that they were sexually assaulted by their father, by their mother, by their aunt, females and males alike, before age 5. So being a single parent can look like a lot of things. You can be in a relationship with a person who is absent from the house in every other way except physically when it's time for them to sexually abuse that child. So I'm not saying that you need to be overly zealous when it comes to, the parenting of your child. So I don't want anybody thinking that it's okay to helicopter parent, because like I mentioned earlier, that could definitely lead to sexually promiscuous behaviors on the part of the child, because they feel like they are sheltered. They feel like they're being locked down, restricted, and things like that for no reason. So you have to provide opportunities for your child to go out into this world and explore freely and safely with the information in hand. So my number one tip when it comes to staying safe while you are dating as a single parent would be for you to know when you're being targeted. The vast majority of sexual predators are out here on these streets and they have never been arrested. They have been sexually abusing the children and their families for ages. Their processes for grooming young women and young men, they're tried and true. They are proven. And so they use them because they know that they cannot get caught because they have not gotten caught. The vast majority of sexual predators are closer to you than you think. And you have to realize that there are certain patterns of behavior that you exhibit that make you a target. When you are overly zealous and you're out here and you're just desperate, right? Just for somebody to connect with somebody, or desperate to connect, period. And you're pushing your kids off to that family member because you're just trying to get out here in these streets and date somebody real quick, right? Please understand that these are behaviors that can put your children at risk. Because before you allow your family members to sit with, be with, and provide oversight for your kids, you need to make sure that you are not doing so without knowing that family member in a more intimate way. That means knowing what makes them tick, knowing what it is that they like, knowing all of what it is they like, asking the questions that will lead you to really connect with them in a way to where they not only feel comfortable with sharing their demons with you, but also to where you feel comfortable enough to trust them with your life, literally. Okay. I know it's hard to know who's a sexual predator and who's not, but the way that I tell people to notice is I'm just sorry. Kevin Samuels is a creep. He is. His ideals around dating, they are questionable. And the thing is, when you have people that have a tendency to gravitate towards younger people, much younger people, for dating, you have to be the person that asks the questions, the pressing questions, to be like, wonder what you was looking at while the rest of the adults were playing poker at the table, right? I find it to be questionable behavior when people are willing to date people who are as young as their kids. I find it to be questionable behavior when people that are grown people are looking to date anybody in their 20s, period. You should never date a person that is 20 years younger than you. You just shouldn't do it. Because what that says is that you realize that you're more than old enough to be their parent. And as a result, you're doing things that are very questionable, right? I could get somewhere 14 is, it's all right ish, because that's a pretty, but even then you need to be older in age, because anybody in their 20s should be off limits for you. Because those people haven't even gone through the next phase of development that solidifies their very much becoming an adult yet. Right? So you need to allow a person to at least get 30 to 35 so that they could get so they could get solidified in their mindsets around being an adult and what that means for them, what that looks like for them. And so when people ask me, well, is Kevin Samuels right? Like, should women wait until they're in their 30s to now start looking for a partner of an older age, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, it depends on the direction that young lady is going in. And it does make a lot of sense, because at least then she's pretty much seated in her individuality and her sense of self and goal and purpose as an adult. And oftentimes it also means that she's already acquired her education and the directionality of where she's going. But more importantly, oftentimes it also means that she's met a guy that she gelled well with, and they should be in a relationship by then for about 4 or 5 years. And that could be somebody that she met from college. So, I feel like you got to do what's best for you, right? But I also think that you have to be mindful. You have to know when you're being targeted. You do have to set healthy dating boundaries. And healthy dating boundaries means that the age range of the person that you want to date, because the age range equates to certain knowledge or patterns of behaviors that people in that age range adopt. Maturation wise. You also have to know when you are a single parent, how you got there, right? And so if you know how you got to being a single parent, whether you were married young and then divorced, or you ended up, being sexually promiscuous in your younger years and then decided to get your life together, date with an intention. And so for many women, if they were the women who were very sexually promiscuous and then decided to get their life together, go back to school, get themselves a trade or a degree, and then move into their positions, right? In life, a lot of these women are now celibate because they want to make sure that while they're dating, they don't find themselves taken advantage of anymore by men. I believe also men have to be accountable for creating these spaces where they've made single moms out of these women. The other component is you cannot have your children around everybody. Okay, so just because you're dating a guy doesn't mean that you're going steady with a guy. Okay, dating a guy is when you're getting to know him before you guys have made things official that you are exclusive with one another and things like this. Because here's the thing, the closer you become to him, the more likely he is to become one of these people on this chart that's out here raping people because they know those people, because they're close to those people, because they are trusted in the spaces along with those kids. And so a lot of people talk about, when they speak about their rape traumas, they talk about it starting in places where those people were responsible for giving them baths and, for getting them dressed and things like that. And this is where I see a lot of the stuff comes up. Also, I hear a lot of young men say, well, my mom had her girlfriend watch me, when I was 8 or 9 years old. And because she had to work 2 jobs, because my father wasn't paying any child support. My father wasn't there. And, this is a repeat story. And that's interesting to me that for many men, this is a repeat story about how they were initially introduced to sex. But in those moments where these boys are 8 and 9 years old, moving into puberty, there is a grown woman taking advantage of them, or a grown man taking advantage of them while the mom is out working. You cannot leave your kids with everyone. You cannot leave your kids unattended to for long periods of time. So your dating boundaries need to align with when you have clear oversight for your kids being provided, where there are cameras in place to protect your children. That needs to be one of your dating boundaries. So it's either that they're being left attended at a daycare facility where they have surveillance everywhere, right? And the parent can check in, or they're being left at a friend's house where you equally have access to their camera system and you can easily check in, or at your house where you have camera systems and you can easily check in. Protecting your kids in this time and age is easier than not. There used to be a time when these weren't things that we could do to protect our children. So that meant just don't date. Period. Just don't. So I say value you. Don't be desperate. You and the components of you are the most important things, period. Value yourself, your children, their safety, your safety. Try to date during the daytime hours where you can date safely out here, because you also have to protect yourself. Men are raped every day, and so are women. That's the reality. So protect yourself, date during reasonable times of the day, and be careful about who you're dating. You really need to be doing a lot of introspective work. So looking at who you're becoming in your journey. As a result, looking at who that person is that you're dating. So be really curious about who it is you're dating, what's motivating them, what's driving them to do the things they do, where they see themselves in 5 years, 10 years, etc. But I feel like that's a really important component. But you have to make sure that the first thing is that you're not out here desperate, so you don't just spring out and date somebody and bring them back home to your kid. That's not safe for you or your child. But also another point of contention is that you don't end up dating someone and rushing out to go on a date and leaving your children in harm's way with a family member that really couldn't be trusted from the beginning. So you need to have a clear head when you do set these dates and when you move out. So the assumptions around sexual abuse, so I can kind of move on to the next topic, are that sexual abuse happens in girls more often than it happens with boys. The reality is it happens about the same for both. However, reported cases of sexual trauma are oftentimes underreported in boys more so than they are with girls. The same thing goes for adult sexual trauma victims. I spoke to you guys in a separate live video that we did about what rape is, what rape really is. And we talked about Bill Cosby being released from prison and things like that during that conversation. Please, in no way, do not think that I'm excusing Bill Cosby for raping these women. And I'm not saying in any way that he did not rape these women, because he definitely did that. However, what I'm saying is justice is a very tedious process, and it has to be served correctly. And so as a result, he's been released. But we have to know what rape is. We have to know what consent looks like. We have to know what consent looks like when it's actually viable. People have to be of sound mind, body, and spirit. You can't just have sex with somebody that's under the influence of drugs and think, oh, okay, well, we're just going to really have a good time now. Like, let's just get it on. No, children cannot consent one way or the other. So a 14-year-old and a 14-year-old is still not legal. That's why it's called statutory rape. Either way, children do not have the ability to consent because they're not adults. Period. So the other piece is set realistic expectations of what dating should look like as you are a single parent preparing to step into that space where you're going to now date, so that you are clear about where you're going and what you're doing in this moment, right? The clearer you are, the more concise you are in your intentions with yourself, the safer your children are, because preparation leads to avoidance of situations that are incidents. So we can avoid incidents just by being prepared, and that's it. Okay. So the last one, of course, is addressing your traumas. Again, okay? I can't stress that enough. Address your traumas, not only in the conversation with your children where you're talking about and labeling body parts, but also in the conversation with your children where you're talking about good touch, bad touch, where you're talking to them at age 3. And I want to make sure I put an emphasis on that, because I know a lot of parents are like, well, parenting doesn't come with a manual and your kids can't understand, but they do. At age 3 and age 4, there are 2 separate conversations that need to take place. You need to have conversations around body parts, sexual reproduction, relationships in general in life, so that your kids understand that relationships can sometimes look a bit colorful, because they can. Yep. Sometimes it's mom and mom. Sometimes it's dad and dad. Sometimes it's mom and dad. Sometimes it's dad and mom. But dad and mom used to be mom and a dad, female and a male with a sex change. Sometimes it's one mom. Sometimes it's one dad. Sometimes it's one mom and a co-parent that is the boyfriend. Either way, if mommy, daddy, anybody touches you in this way, in this area, it's inappropriate. You have the right to tell a person no when it comes to them approaching and touching you in any way. If someone is going to touch you, they need approval first. So what that looks like is, because even as doctors, we have to say, okay, so I'm going to touch you here. We want to prepare you to receive us, because you never know who's been touched inappropriately. And that's a great way to gauge that component as well. So if you are going to touch your child, make sure you make it a point of contention, because you're doing the right thing to let your child know, hey, well, mommy's going to touch you here to clean you. This is how you do it yourself. Daddy's going to touch you here to clean you. This is how you do it yourself. Having those conversations prepares your child for the avoidance of traumas altogether. The more prepared your child is, the more knowledgeable your child is about the fact that sexual trauma happens to kids and adults across the spectrum of all ages, the more prepared they are to report. And the most important part of the conversation needs to be, if mommy touches you and it makes you feel uncomfortable, please feel free to let a police officer know, a teacher know, mommy know, anybody know, but make sure you tell somebody. Because at the end of the day, we need to arm our kids with the right to protect themselves. That's the first thing and the primary thing that you need to be doing. Please understand that there are a lot of assumptions around sexual abuse, and children are abused every single day, every single moment around the clock. Sexual trauma is real. Human sex trafficking is real. Creeps, creepy men, it's a real thing, okay? Creepy women, it's a real thing. It's a whole thing out here. Understand that there are certain behaviors, there are certain preferences that should raise some natural questions, okay? I don't know. It's a lot. It's a lot. But allowing children to set boundaries is so key. I agree. But we have to arm them with the right. We have to be permissive in our parenting so they understand that they have a right to not be touched. They have a right to not be watched. They have a right to their privacy. Doors need to be closed. You know what I mean? And things like this. So I hope that this conversation resonated. You know, if you guys want stats that we reviewed today, I'm going to put it here in the chat box so you can have it. Okay, so you guys have access to the same stats that I shared with you today. And just know, I mean, I feel like it's an important conversation to be having. Start having these conversations with your kids. Start having these conversations with your friends. Start having these conversations with your friends' kids. And to the mom that made that comment, and to the other person that suggested this topic, thank you guys so much for allowing me to have space and, you know, content to expand upon. But just know this, for the lady that made that comment, your friend leaving her kids with people, that's an issue too. But you thinking unrealistically control the child's father is a detriment to your child's safety. So, you know, this is a space for accountability. I'm not here to judge you. I'm just saying, you know, it's a thing. So, go out there and make good choices, be safe, be, you know, permissive with your children, with yourself, love yourself, live well, be well, and take care, folks. Later days.
Who alive can't put me in a box. I redefine any definition you got. I am the tiger, I'm making steps to the top. The flames, I'll rip it up, you just gotta hand me the rock. Take a seat, you cannot stand it. All I know, the flow harder than a Scotch bonnet. Don't try studying me, you cannot manage. This ain't what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon. This ain't what you want, bitch, I'm a fucking phenomenon.